What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I've set about to build the best looking and best performing $1,500 gaming PC that I've ever assembled. I'll be using Montech's brand new King 95 Pro, a case that's reviewed insanely well, and the undisputed champion of 1440p gaming in the form of AMD's 7800 XT. I'll be walking you through all the parts that make this build possible, how to assemble it step by step so you can copy along for yourself, and I'll be taking a look at performance numbers a little bit later so we can see just how well this thing actually stacks up. Let's do this. The Corsair HS80 Max is a wireless gaming headset that packs a punch. With precisely tuned 50mm neodymium drivers, Dolby Atmos support, and wireless connectivity over Bluetooth and 2.4 GHz, it has you covered. Use it with a PC, Mac, PS4 or PS5 and enjoy up to 65 hours of battery life wirelessly and 130 hours on Bluetooth in the process. Need a top up? 15 minutes of charge bags you up to 6 hours of use. Check it out at the first links in the description below. I'm especially excited to be back and filming one of my first builds of 2024, and I think this part selection just makes so much sense for so many people. I've elected to build this system onto an AMD platform, and Intel, no offense, is kind of the only one that makes sense at this budget right now. This is Gigabyte's B650 Gaming X8X, and it's a really superb motherboard for those of us looking to build a system like this. In fact, I'd go as far to say that this is one of the best motherboards you can buy for under $200, full stop. It really is that good. Now, into the motherboard, going to install the processor, and I should probably tell you what the processor is. This is AMD's Ryzen 5 7600X. And with 6 cores, 12 threads, great boost clock speeds, and a price point that is significantly cheaper than the current Intel alternative option, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. You also don't get quite so many problems with temperatures, it's easier to cool, and we even get a bit of overclocking headroom too on the B650 platform. Not as much as you're going to get on the more expensive X670 boards, but frankly, doesn't really matter for a system like this. Memory is next, and I've picked up this T-Force Delta DDR5 kit. This 32GB kit has a low cache latency and a decent speed. The main thing with DDR5 is that cache latency. You want a CL32 kit, CL30 kit if you can. Avoid those much higher CL40 kits and above. As far as the RAM DIMMs go, we're going to be using the 2nd and 4th slots for a dual channel config. Obviously, it leaves us 2 free, so you can add a couple of extra DIMMs in later on if you like for a bit more capacity. You need 32 gigs in 2024 unless you're building a sub $600-700 build. It just isn't enough otherwise. Storage is provided by the Lexar NM790. I'm just dropping everything today. The Lexar NM790. It's a great PCI Gen 4 NVMe drive. This 2TB one is a little bit on the pricey side, but the 1TB option is a great alternative, especially for those of you trying to stick not only below a $1,500 budget, but those trying to push things even further. For the next step of the build, we need to find ourselves a teeny tiny screwdriver to actually go ahead and pop the M.2 drive in. This is easily achieved by just unscrewing the little retention screw on our top M.2 slot. That's going to expose the actual slot itself, which we can use to slide the drive in sort of a 45-degree angle, push it down, and then add the cover back on. The cover's going to keep it in place, and as long as it's screwed in nice and tight, you're not going to have any problems here. Lovely stuff. Now, with that, the motherboard assembly is really getting there at a rate of knots. Now, there is a little bit more work to do here, and that involves prepping our CPU cooler. Now, the cooler choice might seem like a slightly peculiar option. A 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler? We're not doing loads of overclocking, and the Ryzen 5's hardly a hot running chip, so why spend so much money? The answer, because it's really great value. You can pick one of these up for $75-80, I've seen them as low as. Here in the UK, I found one for like £78. It's unbelievable. This low price point makes it, to be honest, a bit of a no-brainer, and I've been so impressed with some of the products DeepCool have brought to market in the last year or so. The main thing in the cooler box we need to dig out is the manual, as that's going to actually tell us what degree of preparation we can actually do at this stage. Now, looking at things, it's actually incredibly simple. So that's really, really good news. And one of the reasons it's so simple is because of this. Now, this is an integrated backplate. It's one of the massive advantages of Ryzen in my mind, especially for first-time builders. You get a backplate included, so you haven't got to faff about installing the one that the cooler provides. Not that it's the hardest thing in the world, but it's a nice quality of life upgrade. Talking of which, you can find our top features to look for in a motherboard linked in the cards section now. These are the screws that we actually need, and you can tell that they're the right ones because the top half is an exposed thread and the bottom half is this integrated plastic or black washer or stopper. Add these onto the 4 posts around the CPU and we're pretty much good to go. And with the motherboard all nicely completed, we can finally take a closer look at the Montech King 95 Pro. Wow, that is a lot heavier than I thought it was going to be. Oh my word. Now, I have to say that this might be one of the most interesting cases of the last 12 months. Now, James, that's quite a big statement, and I really mean it. The reviews of this case on launch day were just off the charts, and I was waiting, mine got stuck in customs for weeks, but we're finally here. Let's have a look, shall we, at it in real life. Comes in 2 variants. You've got the Pro and the non-Pro version. The Pro has some extra fans, some more RGB, costs around about $30 more, give or take, than the normal one. First impressions, and I'm already really impressed. So you've got this sort of nice, really well built, very sturdy mesh top panel. Below that, you've got your support for up to 360mm rads. There's also a tempered glass side panel here, which if we remove, we'll be able to see in more detail the inners of the case. There's 320mm ARGB fans included at the bottom, another one included at the rear, and then 2 140mm ARGBs on the side. As if that wasn't enough, there's also this sort of really sleek curved glass panel, which very easily comes off. Now, not only does this look good, but Montech say that you can run this over with a literal car. I think we'll have to test that out a little bit later, but it does feel very thick. And I have to say, the overall build quality feels absolutely extraordinary. I/O at the front, really nice. 2 USB 3 Type A's, a Type C, your audio, power, and your reset, or RGB control, not too sure yet. This is, of course, a dual chamber design, so room for the 3.5-inch drives and super long ATX PSUs with a nice little support bracket to stop them from sagging down the bottom. First port of call is getting the motherboard in. All of the standoffs look to be in the right places, so it should just be a case of aligning it up and just popping it over that raised standoff. It will hold itself, but not forever, so make sure to screw this in. And it fits pretty perfectly. Of course, limited clearance here for eATX boards, which would overhang pretty significantly. So if I were you, I'd stick with an ATX design instead. Once the motherboard is in, the radiator is going to be next. Now, the top radiator mount is removable, so we can actually take this out if we want to, but I don't actually think we need to. I think we can just go ahead, install the fans on the bottom of the radiator, and install it in situ. Radiator and fans are going to be first. Now, I am going to use the included DeepCool fans for this build, but you could obviously also pick up the Montech fans if you wanted them all to match for whatever reason, but I want to keep a lid on costs really, and we don't need to spend extra money if we don't have to. Just need to pop these 2 silver brackets onto the cooler before adding some thermal paste and securing it down on top of the CPU. 4 thumb screws will stop it from going anywhere, and that's the cooler done. Not really particularly difficult at all. This is shaping up really well, and for the next step, I kind of had a bit of an idea. I've had this NZXT vertical GPU mount kit in for a while, and I think in this case, it will actually work. The only thing that's a little bit tricky is normally you brace it from the bottom against the PSU shield. We obviously can't do that here because of where the fans are, but other than that, I think we should be okay. So I'm going to remove all of the PCI lanes that are pre-installed and add this thing in instead, and the integrated Gen 4 riser cable should give us a nice platform in which we can install the 7800 XT. Talking of which, it is of course the Gigabyte 7800 XT. Now, basically, you want to go onto Newegg and you want to search price low to high on the 7800 XT category page and buy whatever card is the best value. But I have to give it to Gigabyte. Their 7800 XTs are consistently top of the list when it comes to price to performance, and this awesome 3-fan card looks the part, performs really well, runs very quietly, it just ticks a lot of boxes. I'll link everything today, latest pricing and availability at Amazon and Newegg down in the description below. Moment of truth then as to whether the vertical GPU mount is going to work. I don't see any reason it shouldn't. Looking good so far, bit of pressure. How easy is that? Just a couple of screws to actually secure that into place, and I have to say this is quickly shaping up to be one of my favourite looking builds ever. I'm so happy. All that's left to do then is add the power supply in. Thermaltake Smart BM3 750 watt consistently ranks as one of the very best value PSUs you can buy. Full stop, basically. ATX3, PCI Gen 5, not that we need it with our standard 8-pin power connectors. A couple of PSU cable extensions as well are thrown for good measure, and the whole build is going to be pretty much ready to go. Gonna check out, of course, performance in just a few moments, but first, let's admire the hard work. See how good this thing looks. You know what time it is? It's time for a montage. Into performance, and as always, we tested this build in a wide variety of titles to see exactly how it stacked up. Starting off with Call of Duty's Warzone 3. Here I tested at 1440p high with FSR enabled and set to the quality preset, just to give us that little bit more FPS, and the build achieved 180 FPS on average. The 7800 XT is really impressive in this regard. 1440p is a resolution you can tell it feels at home, and it delivers strong results. Very similar numbers were achieved in Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 3 too. 1440p, high settings with FSR enabled on the quality preset, and the 7800 XT pulled in an average of 185 FPS, very similar to the 180 in Warzone 3. Moved through into Starfield at 1440p high, and the frame rate was significantly lower, but still not terrible, with 84 FPS on average. Starfield is a game where optimizations just aren't that great, and for context, this was only 4 FPS less than a similar build with a 4070 Super. It's more about the game optimizations than the GPU itself in this instant. Moved through into Hogwarts Legacy at 1440p high, and the build did well once again. It broke through that 100 FPS mark very easily, delivering 122 FPS on average. Finally, a couple of esports titles to wrap us up. Fortnite 1080p competitive, and the build achieved just shy of 300 FPS with 292 frames per second on average, while Apex Legends also performed well. 1440p high, and the build achieved well over 200 FPS with 230 frames per second to be precise. This is a build then that doesn't break the bank and is especially interesting in the light of the new 4070 Super, a card which has delivered more performance but hardly dethroned the 7800 XT.